All right, guys, for those of you who've been following along with Lockpicking Lawyer and I, as we designed and put together these prototypes of disc detainer picks, and we turned them over to the Sparrows, I think today is going to be a pretty exciting day because we're going to pick this, well, not so challenging home proud. And I'll admit, a lot of you guys are going to point out, all you got to do is just put a screwdriver in there, pop it out, and you're right. I showed that in a video years ago. But this is about picking. And we're not going to do it with one of the prototypes. Instead, we're going to do it with one of two prototypes that we just got in from Sparrows. I got one, and Lockpicking Lawyer and I got one. Both of them come in these nice little cases. And I've just had a chance to take a look at these and play with it just a little bit. And I've got to tell you, I'm impressed with how closely Sparrows copied the design. It's pretty much the same in every dimension. You recall we made one out of brass, a little bit thicker here, and then Lockpicking Lawyer was kind enough to make one out of stainless steel and engrave it with the Lock Lab logo. But this was the latest one, and just about everything on this Sparrows is a direct, perfect copy, to include even the threads. I mean, these are, I don't know, what I can't remember what we used, but I'm surprised that they used even the same thread pitches. That's how close this copy is. So very, very cool. The other thing that they did, let me loosen up this arm here, is you guys made a lot of comments about why don't you put a flat side on all four sides. So if you need to rotate this, to get a better angle on it, you can do that by simply rotating it 90 degrees, putting it back in, and then tightening up on these two arms, and it'll lock it in place. You can easily change the length of that nose to fit the lock that you're working on. So the pitch is the same, the arm's the same. They did take a couple of liberties. You can see on the originals, these were knurled, and these look like they were all CNC'd. Function-wise, it doesn't make any difference, and it gives you good traction, I think, on here. They did make a couple of mods to the handle. Ours has a reduced diameter here where we put in some grub screws to hold the tensioner in place. And again, with the same CNC type action, you can see they knurled it and then put little clean slices in between, but the end here is larger diameter. And I have played with this a little bit. I kind of like this actually a little bit better, and we never asked them for this. They just did it. I like it because if I need to really put some torque, instead of grabbing the smaller diameter like we have to on the prototypes, I can now grab the smaller or the larger diameter, and you can see with those horizontal slices, without watching it, I can get a good idea about how much I'm rotating. And so they did I got to say, a really good job as far as I can tell, but the proof's in the pudding. Let me go ahead and put this thing back together the way it was. We'll grab that lock, and let's see if we can't get this nasty old home proud picked with the new Sparrows prototype. All right, let's see if we can get this bad boy open. On the key, of course, it works perfectly. It gets hung up, a little hanging up right there, but that doesn't matter. We should be able to get it open. It is 8 discs, and I can tell you they're pretty narrow discs, and we got two things against us. First, very narrow discs, and the size of this tip, as it comes from Sparrows, is almost identical to the size of the opening. So I'm going to have a little trouble fitting it, but I didn't want to modify this in any way before I did the test. So let's see. I'll go ahead and let me rotate all these discs as far as I can get them clockwise. Here we go. Line up the tip, slide him in there, and then push the tip all the way to the rear. Now this is where the part gets a little flaky because he just barely fits. It has to be perfectly square. There we go. All right, now let's try it. Maintain tension and start backing out, trying to find that first disc. Let me zoom in a little, and I will try to keep this thing centered as best I can, so you can see what kind of feedback this thing's given me. It rotates freely. There's no binding or anything like that. If there were, that would not be right. Okay, it looks like we have the first disc. We're starting to grab him right there. Ooh, and I fell out. Doesn't quite line up, but that's okay. And I think we just hit that gate. Feels like a gate. Now let's try to get it through to the next disc. This is the challenging part here. I think that's it right about there. I think that's the gate. Okay, he rotated and we got no clicking. I'm going to put him back. And I'm really putting some torque on this tip. And it snapped that time, almost like it was a gate. That felt like a gate, and I got a slight turn on the core there. Let me keep backing up. That'll be about right. And again, all the way around, no clicking. I'm going to push him back. Again, incredible torque. I'm lightening up on my tension so I don't break the tip off. And it felt like, double check here, it felt like he slipped into the gate right there at the beginning. So I'm going to leave him alone and keep moving back. Okay, definitely got a nice little click, and I felt a slight turn on the core there. And it looks like I might have pushed my tensioner in the lock too far, and perhaps the nose of it is grabbing the first two discs instead of just the first one. So I'm going to try to back him. I'm going to lighten up and pull him out a little bit. Yeah, so I definitely have more than one disc there. So right there, I think I've only got one disc. Now let's go back and try that very last one and see if I pull it out of there enough to grab him. Should be right about there. And I would say that that was the disc that we were looking for. Well, it doesn't want to open for some reason now. There we go. Made in China. I guess, what can you expect? All right, let's talk more about this. It's not about this chunky lock. It rotated very freely. It gave excellent feedback. What I did notice is the discs did not line up with these lines, but that's because I didn't finesse it back and forth. The spacing on these are identical to all the prototypes which we measured, and we know the spacing is right. So once you find exactly where the first disc is, even though it's in the middle or in between two lines, that means all the follow-ons also will be at the same position in between the lines. So I'm not worried about that at all. I did have a little trouble. First of all, we had trouble with the tips. The initial prototype tips that we were sent did not seem to work very well. The tip kept breaking off when you applied pretty extraordinary pressure, as all beginner pickers do. So we asked them to take a look at that, and this new one really takes a lot of abuse. They welded it somehow. This is exactly how it looks. Let me back this up so we can get the autofocus to work a little better. That's exactly how it came from the factory, but I abused this thing trying to break it, and no luck. You can see they heat treated it, so whatever they did it right. A couple of the things that we are going to ask for improvements. First of all, if you take a look at the nose here, you notice how the edge of that is chamfered, and on all of our prototypes, they are square. And that gives you more surface area to grab that tensioning disc. We're going to ask them, they did this of their own initiative, they chamfered it, probably to prevent us from snagging and cutting our fingers. They did it out of kindness, but we're going to ask them to make sure that that's perfectly square for maximum contact with that disc. That, I got to tell you, is just about, obviously with the new tips, that's just about all we're going to be asking for. If you guys see anything else that you'd like to see changed, put it in the comments now. Sparrows is going to be watching the comments very, very closely before they go into full production. If you see something you want changed, this is our last chance to let Sparrows know. Appreciate your time, guys. Stay safe, stay legal, and no, I'm not giving away the only prototype. Thanks, guys.